Okay, good evening, folks. I'm going to call to order the regular board meeting of the Marin Municipal Water District for Tuesday, October 24th. Terry, could you get a roll call?
Yes, good evening. Director Ranjiv Kush.
Here.
Director Larry Russell.
Here.
Director Matt Sampson.
Here.
Director Jed Smith.
Here.
And President Monty Schmidt.
Here. Okay, could I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Do we have any public comments on items on the agenda? Not on the agenda.
There are none.
On the agenda.
On the agenda, sorry. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Director Kush.
Aye.
Director Russell.
Aye.
Director Sampson.
Aye.
Director Smith.
Aye.
And President Schmidt.
Aye. Okay. Let's see here. Can I get public comments? Are there any public comments on items not on the agenda?
There are none.
Okay. All right. Then I think we're moving on to directors and general managers announcements. I'll start with, how about with Larry, with you on the phone or on Zoom?
Nothing from me.
Jed?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to have been invited to participate on a panel at the Westminster Presbyterian Church in Tiburon on Saturday, representing myself as an individual board member, not the organization or the board itself, but it was a wonderful group. Dick Spotswood was the moderator. Stephanie Moulton Peters was here and was there as well, and Melissa Blaustein. So we had a robust conversation. I'd say about 60-75 people showed up, and it was a really thoughtful, well done speaker series that they're doing there, and that's all I have to report.
Okay, thank you. Ranjiv?
Nothing for me. Thanks.
Matt?
Yep. Thanks, Monty. On Thursday, the 19th, I attended the Tomales Bay Foundation meeting. Most of the meeting was spent talking about the grants they're working on for most of their research they're starting to do in the Bay Area, in the Tomales Bay area. But they did start expressing some interest on ways we could partner with them on some outreach projects on stewardship stuff. So as those ideas start to mature, we can bring them forward to staff to see what the flavor is or the desire for that. We'd like to point out that I'm very happy on the 18th of last week. Prescribed fire was brought back to watershed lands for the first time in a long time. And it was really good to see up in the area off of Ridgecrest. On the 20th last week, myself and Director Kush had the opportunity to go ahead and tour a good portion of the watershed with Ranger Matt Circle. And one of the stops we made was at the burn area. And it was really good to see, especially the area with assistance from a helicopter. But we also had an opportunity to take a look at the trail network up top. When we start looking at the rec management plan, and really good to get the insight from that, as well as a lot of the forest health pieces on there. So very appreciative of Matt Circle's time and for Sean and all the work the folks are doing. That's it.
All right. And I have nothing. Ben?
I have a couple items. First, I wanted to share that I was informed today that the membership of the union approved overwhelmingly the terms of the new MOU. That went on a while. Is always somewhat difficult, but I'm glad it's behind us. And I expect we'll bring it to the board. We're targeting November 7th. Oh, I do have another item. This item's kind of a twofer. At the senior leadership team's retreat earlier this year, among the initiatives that we developed and talked about was kind of an upgrade to retirement celebrations. Just recognize that there was an opportunity, and with COVID, folks long tenured retired without, a sense of a celebration. So among the initiatives there, we developed in-house operations staff a new plaque that I'll share that's made from the tanks of our old redwood, the wood of our old redwood tanks. And this is our district's valve cover. So I'll pass that around to share. And it so happens that the beta test for our first new plaque is our now retired from the district, Director of Engineering, Crystal Yasmin, 9 years at the district. I certainly thank her for her service to the district, and personally appreciate all the work you did working with me, the senior leadership team, and working in a range of roles and places in the organization. And I also appreciate that she's not going to be too far. And she did say she's going to keep her phone number and will take my calls. So I appreciate that as well. So thank you, Crystal.
Yeah.
Can I say a few words? Okay. Thank you very much, Ben. This is a great honor to get the first retirement plaque. This. Oh, okay. Oh, stand for it. Thank you. Yeah. So 9 years here, 24 years in the industry so far. It's been a pleasure working for Marin. Marin is actually one of the smallest water districts I've ever worked for. And while I worked here, I've had the opportunity to really get involved in every aspect of a water utility. And that for me has been really fulfilling. The larger water industry utilities, you get sort of siloed into a certain area. So, while I was here, I mean, my first charge from Krishna Kumar was get the BIFIP. Get it done. It's been lagging for 12 years, so we finally got that over the finish line. And with the help of staff, it seemed like every time there was a big plan that needed to be finished, they gave it to me to do. So while I was here, they had the opportunity to do the urban water management plan, the wildfire prevention plan, the local hazard mitigation plan, the business continuity plan. After you name it, it came to my desk. And so, it's been a real honor to be involved in all of these efforts. Also, I started in the field crews, and those guys really know what they're doing. And I have to say that that's one thing that really impressed me about Marin Water was that your staff really knows their job. I mean, there's a pipe break. Those guys are out there. They've fixed it. They've backfilled within like 4 hours. So, you have to really appreciate the responsiveness and the expertise of staff that you have in-house. And we've had a really big turnover that I've been here in the last 9 years. And I would say 80% of the staff is like, new staff, and they're eager, they're excited about their jobs. They're all very intelligent, professional, and it's a real pleasure to work with such subject matter experts. Everybody here, the senior leadership team, we really rely on each other. We bounce off ideas. So it's been really a great pleasure to work here, and I appreciate the plaque. Thank you very much, and best of luck. I'm still a customer, so I'll be coming in. Maybe I'll give you a hard time sometimes in the future. We'll give it a few months, but thank you very much. And I want to thank the board. Being an elected official takes a lot of time and commitment. You really work long hours. You don't get paid for it. I mean, you get paid for, the meetings, but you are and your community should be indebted to the service that you provide. And so thank you for being here, and thank you for being concerned about Marin Water. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it can't go without saying, Crystal, that we are sad to see you go. You have been a critical part of the district, and as you talked about, a lot of the initiatives that you shepherded are really some of the pivotal turning points of the district as we've modernized, as we've gone through an extreme dry year period where we have learned a lot and needed to respond to what we've learned and come up with our plans for moving forward and identifying opportunities for water supply resiliency and so much more. And it's a huge transition time for the district that you have helped shepherd us through, and we really appreciate it. And we're glad that you're a customer and that we will continue to see you. So thank you for all that you have done for us, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Can I say?
Yeah, please.
Crystal, before you leave, I just wanted to tell us, give you my perspective with a little story. About 2 months ago, you and I met with the Ross Town Council to discuss the traffic impacts that they would be facing related to the Pine Mountain Tunnel replacement project.
Right.
And you gave a great talk. And afterwards, we walked out of that, and there was one of the Ross police officials, I believe
it was the police chief.
It was the police chief who walked out as well. And he said, you know, I really like listening to people who know what they're talking about. And that is exactly how I felt every time you've presented.
Thank you.
I've really appreciated the depth of your knowledge and the opportunity to learn from you. I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss you, but best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Crystal, this is Larry. I had the pleasure of working with you all 9 years that you were here, and you will be missed dearly. And I've always lived by the premise that if you want to get something done, give it to a busy person. And that always works.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for the assistance you provided to the district, and you will be missed.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And I want to just take a quick second to note, Ben, as I know as you're walking away, to say thanks to Crystal. Just the importance of the announcement that you did provide in terms of an agreement being reached, or the union exception of the proposal for our contract. I just think that we'll talk about it more when it comes to the board officially, but want to thank you and the staff that have, that worked with all of our members of our district to arrive at something that I believe everybody brings us all back together as one district working toward our mission. So thank you. Okay.
Well, I guess I'm gonna do. Right. Yeah. There we Everybody wants to.
All right. The rest of the evening will be probably boring by comparison. Okay, folks, we'll move on to the consent items. Can I get a motion to adopt the consent calendar or consent items?
So moved.
A second.
Do we have any public comment on the consent items?
Yes, Mr. Ed Jamison. Go ahead, Mr. Jamison.
I'd just like to thank Crystal for outstanding contributions to the district and for her enthusiasm about techie computer stuff of all things. She has made a much appreciated contribution as a member of MMWD's truly outstanding staff. We're really blessed to have such a competent group of employees under Ben Horenstein's direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
no
motion. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, Director Kush,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Sampson,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
and President Schmidt.
Aye. Okay, with that, we will move to our regular items. And first up is our board policy 46 on reserves.
All right, thank you, President Schmidt and the board members. My name is Brett Uppendahl. I'm the district's finance director. I'll go ahead and start my presentation here. Hopefully you can see that okay. As you mentioned, the title of this item is our recommended revisions to our reserve policy. The board may recall that we've done a couple study sessions on this topic over the last few months in the finance and administration committees. And so this item here is the culmination of those study sessions with all of the red line edits attached. And so you can see that the actual changes to the wording. I believe we have 3 attachments to this report today. One is the old version, one is the red line, so we can see each change, and then one is what will be the clean version upon the board's approval. So I'll briefly kind of go over what we've been studying in the finance and administration committees, and then I'll close it up and have time for any questions. So first, just an overview of what we're talking about. The district maintains 6 different reserve funds within our existing reserve policy 46. This is a summary of each of the different funds or kind of buckets that we put the reserves into. One column there towards the right is our policy target, meaning if we were fully in compliance with our policy, what the amounts would be. The next column there is our preliminary balance for the end of fiscal 23. You can see that if you add them all up there towards the bottom, we would have a target of about $110 million. And then our actuals are closer to about $43 or $45 million. So we're certainly below the target right now. And I think that's well known and part of what the expectation was over the last 2 years as we used our reserves much as planned during the drought. And this slide here shows how we use them over the last 2 to 3 years to make our way through the drought and to make investments along the way without having to stop all of our business. So obviously, when you make your way into the financial difficulties in terms of revenues, it's a balance of cutting expenses and using reserves. And so now we're here at a point where we had well-funded reserves in 2021 at about $72 million. We've drawn down those about $24 million over the last 2 years to the current total of $48 million. And then now is the time to start building them up again. And so that's why we have the reserve policy coming to the board, so that as we build them up over the next couple of years, we can build them up more strategically and really put ourselves in position to not only weather the next drought that may come, but give ourselves a better footing to be able to make strategic investments and to be able to mitigate any kind of rate fluctuations resulting from kind of the reserve balances in the future. So part of the reserve policy discussions that we've had is really looking at agency, I should say industry best practices for how to build your reserves. And so we looked at the kind of big 4 or 5 recommended strategies when you're making your reserve funds. Number one, you want to take a look at your structural budget risk, because the reserves are just one side of the equation, right? You have your budget throughout the year and how you manage your funds. So you want to have baseline levels for unanticipated expenditures, unanticipated, equipment purchases or replacements. And also on the revenue side, you want to protect yourself from any undue volatility that may happen over the 2-year budget or over the 4-year rate cycle. When you look there at the uncertainties that we do face, I just mentioned we have a 4-year rate cycle. We've experienced a couple of droughts over the last decade or so. And then the last 2 years we've had inflation, and each of those, while generally we know they're coming in parts of the business cycles, you don't know exactly when or to what degree. And so that's the uncertainty we deal with in terms of the forward-looking assumptions. We also have one of the older, or if not the oldest, municipal water district here in the state of California. So we do have a lot of infrastructure in the ground that nobody sees, but when it breaks, we do have to make sure we repair it quickly. And so a big piece of our reserves is our unplanned infrastructure repairs. And I mentioned a few times you want to have strategic funds available for either new investments or accelerated investments in infrastructure. And I think we're also realizing now with the federal funding that's available, we want to have funds available for grant matching when the time comes. And we don't want to have to cut our capital program or dip into our operating reserves just to be able to match grants that will benefit the district in the future. Finally, the fire, flood, earthquake type risks that we do face, you want to make sure you always have enough to at least keep the wheels running for the organization until we get other aid like FEMA or whatever it may be. So for the 2 to 3 months, we might need operating capital on hand to respond and to keep the wheels turning here. And then finally, just kind of the core litigation and insurance reserves, making sure that if we do have large scale events that are, above and beyond either our current insurance and or require us to pay our deductibles, we have funds on hand for that. So those are the basic kind of guidance that we get from the leading agencies. One of the things they also mentioned to do when you're planning your reserves is to really kind of take an agency specific look at what your risk levels are. So not just kind of the standard 4 or 5 things or the standard ratios, but really to kind of have a ground up approach into how you would build your reserves. And so we took a stroll down that path in terms of how we would build up reserve levels for the things you might know would happen or would be most likely to happen. And we put them into 3 different categories, kind of the lower or more conservative risk basis, a medium risk, and then if we wanted to generally fund them at a high level, what that would turn out to be. And so without going through all the details here, the bottom lines there are kind of what's more important. And it lets you know that we need to have reserve levels probably at the minimum around that $38 million range. In the medium, if you look at this kind of building block space analysis, it would be in the 73 to 75 million range. And the high end of that seems to be about the $110 million range. So all in all, 38 to 110 is a big range. So it's not really necessarily helpful, but it does put the bookends around the discussion. The middle of that is interesting to note. The middle range there, 73.9, is just about equal to where we started off kind of pre-drought at our high level funding for our reserves. So that lets you know that we were probably in the right ballpark there in 2021. Albeit maybe not in all the right categories. And so that was the second thing we took a look at is if we know a general bottom line range and where we want to kind of strike that right balance of holding funds for future uncertainties, then how do the other agencies here in the Bay Area treat this issue? How do they plan for it? And so we looked at, the 4 or 5 agencies that we typically compare ourselves to: East Bay Mud, Alameda County Water, San Ramon Services District, and Contra Costa Water. Each of them have different ways of addressing reserve planning. Not everyone has the same exact buckets that we do. Some have different ratios. They also have different risk levels and different operating models. Some have water and wastewater together. We're the only one that has an active watershed within our service area. And so there's different levels of risk you have to plan for here. But what I did notice, if you kind of cut again to the bottom line here, that all of us are kind of coalescing around this general, 50 to 60% of your operating budget when you look at your operating reserves. So again, that kind of gives us a little bit of confidence knowing that we're about in the right range for overall operating reserve levels, maybe slightly lower than Alameda County and San Ramon Services, but on the whole, about that, in that right range of 50% of our operating budget, which for context purposes would be about $50 or $60 million here for the district. So having taken a look at kind of industry best practices, our own building blocks assessment of what would be agency specific, and then what do our neighboring agencies do, it really kind of helped us hone in on our recommendations for how to better allocate our reserves. And the gist of it is here, I think what we wanted to do is within each reserve fund, we're using the word reserve fund. So there's the 6 on the left there, reserve funds. Rather than just having, 4 of them with minimum amounts and then 3 of them with unstated minimums, we wanted to give each policy or each reserve fund a stated minimum amount to make sure we had at least that much in each balance. And then we also noticed that a couple agencies here in the Bay Area use target amounts, meaning that if we can, we'd like to fund them even more than just the bare minimum. And so we developed ranges for each between the minimum amount and the target amount. And then we also gave them stated purposes there on the far right. So we know which buckets to use, and it's more defined, when we encounter those situations, where we'll pull from and how we'll rebuild them in the future. And so you can see basically across the left there, current policy amount again was at 110, and those are broadly 110,200,000 in our current policy amount, meaning if we adhered strictly to our own policies, we'd have 110 million in the bank. And you can see the way that was spread would be 18 million in an insurance fund, which seems to be way too high. And then 32 million in capital, which again is probably too high, meaning that's a whole year of capital just sitting aside. So rather than taking that 110 in those 4 broad buckets, we're recommending that we spread out the minimum amounts into each of the buckets, totaling about $53 million there, $53.7 million in the minimum, with a target amount of shooting for in terms of future funding plans over there totaling about 81.2. So again, kind of that 50 to $70 million range is where we ended up at, and we tried to outline it within each reserve fund to make more sense, so we could manage that and use it, throughout the budget year and throughout the rate cycle. And so the recommendations are more outlined in the actual red line of the attachments, but in the summary here, what that would give us is these 6 buckets. You see that they're at the top, plus a new one at the bottom, and I'll cover that in just a second. But the 6 buckets at the top, again, would be insurance, workers' comp, our capital reserve, our operating reserve, rate stabilization, and then the water supply project fund. I'll talk a little bit about that last one there on the bottom, pension stabilization. And that's been a practice of the district to hold funds for future pension fluctuations, but we had never actually made its way into our reserve policies formally. And so on the finance team, since the board had given us direction 4 or 5 years ago to hold money aside, we've been doing that, but we have not incorporated into policy. So this addition of the pension stabilization reserve would be to put that into our formal policy and actually speak to it in terms of, what's our target amount and how we'll use that over time. And so we've given it 2 targets amounts, the minimum of 3.5 million and the maximum or the target of 6 million. And that's intended to help us, pay our required CalPERS contributions if there are fluctuations in the market that are beyond our control, again, without having to cut the district's budget or forego any capital projects in the meantime while we wait for the market to catch up and or kind of go through the cycles that the market does over time. And so in conclusion here, these are the recommended amounts we have in each reserve bucket. Again, this is in response to the fact that we did change our budget and our rate structure this last year. And so that definitely, changes the risk profile of the district. It actually increases a little bit of reliance on variable water sales. So the changes that we were recommending here with the reserve funds will help mitigate that, or at least give us a more of a roadmap in how to handle any fluctuations from year to year in the revenue. Reserve balances, knowing they do have a significant health or impact on our fiscal health, and we have used them, we have a chance to rebuild them more strategically. And so and the bottom there, our recommendations are to define and refine the purpose for each of our reserve funds and establish the minimum and target balances for each reserve fund. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Brett. Larry, we'll start with you on the Zoom.
I'd just like to say thank you, Brett, for putting the time in to define all this stuff for us, because it's been one of my problem areas since I've been on the board. When is the detail going to be done, though?
When is the detail going to be done?
Yeah, that stuff on the last slide. You said recommend revisions and things like that.
So the details in the attachments in terms of the red line language for our fiscal policies. And then this will give us a guidance for as we're making our way through this fiscal year and in future years in how to essentially refill the buckets along the way per the board direction and per the policy. And it'll also help us, plan for future in terms of future budgets and future rate cycles.
Okay, we need to be sure to keep funding that unfunded liability section to see if we can move that forward.
Yes.
Anything else, Larry?
No.
Jed?
Great. Thanks, Brett. I've gone through this in detail with you and reviewed your recommendations. I think they're spot on, super appreciative, and this will help get us back on track and have a good conservative financial structure going forward. Well done. Thank you.
Ranjit?
Yeah, my thanks as well, Brett. This is maybe the second or third presentation you've given, and I think you've, walked us through this enough so that, it really does come together in a nice way. One question, which you've probably answered before, but just wanted to check on again, just in terms of the ability to, to move funds from one reserve to another. I'm thinking a lot about the operating versus rate stabilization. There's a lot of overlap there. And, do we have the ability to, say, move funds from rate stabilization to operations if that becomes necessary?
It's a good question. So yeah, this does not lock us in forever, but what this does do is it provides staff direction in the meantime. And then if we do make changes in the future, that would be during a public and open meeting. And so the board will be able to vote on that to give us further direction if it was outside of these ranges. So you will maintain control over that in terms of the board's, public actions.
Great. And then maybe last comment, we discussed this previously, the possibilities of sometimes setting up a trust for our our pension reserves, and there may be some long-term benefits for doing that in terms of, benefiting from the market and things. So I know you said you would maybe revisit that at a later point. Hope we get to do that.
Yeah, no, it's something, and it's something I breezed over at the beginning here, but the idea that reserve funding is just one piece of financial management. We have 4 or 5 other policies that go with that, and then we also have the strategies behind budget and behind investments that we can make. And so that is something that I've taken from you to look into. And as we kind of make our way through the next couple of years, we'll continue to scan out there the options available and return to the board with more updates.
Matt?
Excuse me, Brett, thank you. As all the other board members have said, appreciate the detail on this. And I definitely think that the way you're moving is the right direction. Last time we saw your presentation, we talked about the ability to match with grants with funds. And I wonder if you could speak to that in terms of how comfortable you are being able to, with this structure here, being able to have us match grant dollars, especially when we're going to be pretty aggressive, hopefully with applications continuing in the next few years.
Mm-hmm. I think the idea here, and I think we'll have to, work on this as we practice it out, is that, if we have surplus funds just from our operating budget, those can always be used, for a match within the current year. As we have it out here now, I think we're thinking the capital budget or capital reserve would be the first place, as most grants would be more for capital projects. And so I think we'd like to align those with the capital reserve first. The water supply project fund there at the bottom, I think that's intended to give us funding for supplemental water supply for large scale projects. So I think if we needed to draw on that for more grant matches, that's probably an appropriate area as well. And there's nothing telling us we can't use the unrestricted operating reserve either. I mean, that is a pretty big bucket we have there. There's nothing against using that for grant matches. It would just be something we'd want the board to kind of sign off on in terms of acceptable use there, as it would be technically an unanticipated expenditure. It would be something that's more strategic as opposed to kind of, thrown down on us.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Brett, I just want to say, I think, again, much appreciation to echo everything that the other board members have said. I feel like you've taken a look at our at our financials, and I feel like given it a sort of a deeper look and greater resolution, the fact that you're breaking things out into more bins so that we can see where those funds reside and how they provide stability in a range of different areas has really been beneficial and very helpful. Instead of having just one lump sum of money available, it's great to see how we are shoring up various parts. I think also in addition to the health that these reserves bring us is also to our bond rating, which I think can't be underscored enough. And so again, the guidance that you've brought us here to have this level of resolution, which shows the health and stability of our district, which helps us to be able to fund the projects that we know are coming down the pipeline with our water supply resiliency work. So thank you for that. I think, personally, I think, we need to have a target, and I'm appreciative that we've come up with a target amount that reflects some revision to what we once did. I don't think we should just hit repeat. We should thoughtfully make changes as needed. And I'm supportive of this change. I think that, when we hit this target, when we hit the target amount, we should recognize that moment, because that will be an accomplishment. And then should we choose to fund further because we believe that we need to, we'll obviously re-hit that. I do think that we live in an era of great uncertainty. I don't know if anybody would say that we should expect calm waters for the years ahead, and that we should just trust that, the challenges that we've been facing for the past, 4 years that I've been involved with the board, that is a thing of the past. I think we actually should expect floods and droughts and increasing costs of materials and many other things that continue to put stress on us in various different ways, of which, again, the reserve funds are meant to buffer us against those things. So really appreciate the look that you've put into it and the what it will do for our district. So thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments from board members? Okay, this is an item that's for vote. So do we have any public comments?
Yes, we do have one. Mr. Phil Sauter.
Not on this section. I'm sorry. I'll be for the next
Oh,
section.
okay.
I misread.
Never mind, we're good.
Okay, can I get a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
And could we get a roll call vote?
Yes, Director Kush,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Sampson,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
and President Schmidt.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the next agenda item, which I am actually going to recuse myself from, because involves work with the Russian and Eel River projects, some of which my other day job has some involvement, minor as it is, but to maintain a clear separation of any conflicts, I'm going to recuse myself and step aside, and I can hand it maybe to Ranjiv to lead the agenda item. Thank you.
Okay.
I was about to predict smooth sailing and calm seas ahead.
You could still do that. Paul. It's okay.
We'll wait for the water supply report, maybe. So good evening, Paul Sellier, Water Resources Director. This is an approval item tonight. This is we're seeking the board's authorization to join a support letter for what is being referred to as the new Eel Russian facility. In July of this year, the Mendocino Inland Water and Power, the Round Valley Indian Tribes, and Sonoma County submitted a proposal to PG&E for the Cape Horn Dam and the Van Arsdale diversion that we kind of colloquially refer to as Potter Valley and Potter Valley diversion. That proposal is called the new Eel Russian facility. The proposal has 4 basic criteria for acceptance from PG&E, one of which is that there needs to be the formation of a regional entity that is responsible for ownership, construction, and operation of these new facilities. And then the design of the facilities, or the proposal design, has got to support the co-equal goals of fish migration in the eel and, of course, water diversions for the Russian. The sort of third element is that we need, obviously, to have some agreement between the regional entity and PG&E for the sort of sale and purchase of the project facilities. And then finally, The proposal needs to have support from NIMS, National Marine Fishery Service, and California Fish and Wildlife, along with governmental organizations and NGOs from both basins. So those are sort of the four basic criteria. And this proposal was submitted to PG&E in July of this year. We heard on October 4th of this year that PG&E had agreed to include this proposal as part of their initial draft surrender application and decommissioning plan. It's a bit of a mouthful. So that was good news. And of course, Sonoma Water tonight are asking us, the district, to join our shoulder and provide support for this proposal. One of the reasons we think, obviously, that this is important for us to think about is the loss of Potter Valley as a diversion for the Russian River would be fairly disruptive to a number of people who live on the Upper Russian River. It's estimated about 97,000 people might be directly affecting, their water supply would be directly affected. And the reliability of water for even us from Sonoma may be affected as well with the loss of the Potter Valley diversion. So staff is tonight asking the board for authorization to join the letter of support as requested by Sonoma and included in your packet this evening. Any questions?
Thank you, Paul. Board questions? We'll start again, Larry, with you.
I'm cool.
Thanks, Larry. Jed?
Yeah, I think this was an extremely clever plan that was put together by Sonoma and other regional suppliers and constituents and boards. And it's complex and been a long time in the running. So I want to lock arms with Sonoma and some of their other contractors and constituents and see how we can help. You know, this is not the end. This is in many ways the beginning. And I think we have an important role to be supportive here and not just for ourselves, but for a lot of other folks in the region. So I'm supportive of this letter. Thanks.
Thanks, Jed. Matt? Jed, I think you said something that I was thinking about. You know, this really does sound like the beginning of something. Do we have any estimates on how long the transfer process will take? And beyond that, it sounds like new facilities will be built. And I know these are sort of operational questions that maybe we don't want to dig into today. So that's also okay if we just really want to focus on the letter and then maybe I think we could spend a whole meeting talking about this new facility. So
right.
Paul, if you just say not now, that's also fine.
There is some visibility into the schedule. It's overall for the full decommissioning, it's expected to be quite a long-term affair. So maybe 10 years, something like that. But in the short term, we can expect the initial draft surrender application from PG&E sometime around middle of November was what they were saying. And this is really just kind of a trial balloon product that they put out for everybody to kind of react to, and then they go back, kind of close the green curtain and make some adjustments to their proposal. And that proposal is submitted, I think, in next year in June or so. And there is a schedule in one of the attachments, attachment one, that kind of goes out further than that.
Great, thanks. And clearly no concerns regarding this proposal.
No.
Great. Any public comments, Terry?
Yes, Mr. Larry Menikis.
I'm sorry. Okay. Good evening. I just want to add that the focus on the letter very early on is on efficient and timely fish migration. And I think that's where the pushback is going to come in the North Coast, is to make sure that that is ensured. And if we can do that, this can be very successful. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further comments.
Yeah, just one more. When you said there's no concerns here, there's a lot of concerns. This is a big project. And
no, Jed, but I was saying specifically the letter of support.
Yeah, I think we're pretty cool. I think it's high level and yeah. Thanks.
Okay, then with that, do we have a motion to approve the letter of support for the proposed Eel Russian River facilities.
Yes, support, moved.
Second.
Could we have a vote then, Terry?
Yes. Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Sampson,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
and Vice President Kush.
Aye.
Thank you.
Well, it's only 10%, and it's sort of factored in.
Okay. And with that, we'll move on to agenda item 8, the water supply update.
Yeah, good evening. While Lucy's getting this all set up, I'm just going to be a listener this evening to this one, and Lucy will be delivering the water supply update.
Sorry, still learning the ropes. Okay, share. Make it? Yep. Okay. Good evening, Board of Directors. Lucy Croy, Water Quality Manager. Tonight, I'm going to give an update on our water supply. And first, we'll start with a summary of the water year. So water year typically always goes from beginning of October through the end of September, as that represents really when we receive water, and it's representative of a water year. So we'll look back at 2023. And then we'll look at a seasonal forecast going forward, moving into 2024, and then apply that to our reservoirs, look at a projection, and then end with a summary. So looking back on water year 2023, it was actually quite different than the years that we've experienced the past few years coming out of the drought. It was actually a little bit wetter and cooler. So looking across the western part of the United States, there was received quite a bit of precipitation, almost 140% throughout California. And then it was actually a tad bit cooler too, and that allowed some of water agencies throughout California to retain some of the snow melt a little bit longer in the season. And as discussed at times, much of the rainfall that comes to California is through the form of atmospheric rivers. And so on the right-hand side, we've pulled the map that's showing the atmospheric rivers that came through in water year 2023. And it was really quite an incredible year. As you can see, there's many lines that hit the coast of California, including hitting Marin. And throughout the state, it was recorded that actually 50% of the annual precipitation was totaled just within the period of December 26th through January 19th. So within that 3-week period, if you remember those back-to-back atmospheric rivers, the state received 50% of its rainfall, which is incredible. So then on the left, we brought in a map to look at the drought. So the year of water year 21 comparatively, and it is very stark to look at the difference of really just 2 atmospheric rivers hit California and only one really hit even close to us. So it just shows the magnitude of the impact that atmospheric rivers can have on our watershed in California, and both with Marin. And then just a quick glance at beyond Marin. I thought these pictures were quite incredible. You know, we progressed out of the drought rather quickly, but the state was still in the drought in 2022. So this is Lake Oroville. Lake Oroville is the largest reservoir in the State Water Project, and as of December 21st, it was still at 64%. And now it's over above average, so 136%. So it's just a incredible picture to see the difference across the state and see what a better place the entire state is in after one water year. So now bringing it into Marin water and where we sit, that rainfall also hit, all those atmospheric rivers hit Marin water. We had a total Thank you. We had a total of over 75 inches of rain, which is 145% of average. So it's that black line that goes all the way up to the top, which is not the largest that we've seen even in the last 10 years, but it did have a huge impact on our reservoirs. And as you can see, there's a lot of lines on this chart, but in that period that I mentioned, December 26th to the January 19th, we received 34 inches, and our average in an annual basis is 52. So you can see that in that 3-week period, we had a huge impact in our reservoirs just in that same period. So how that played into our storage, we started off the year just below 60,000 acre feet, which was still above average last year, and then hit the rain in late December and jumped right up 25,000 acre feet and started spilling. And then basically we're spilling all the way until May, which was pretty incredible. It was quite a long season that we received rainfall and we were spilling water, and have ended the year just below 70,000 acre feet. So you can see over on the right-hand side. And so we took some time to look at, how this impacted not only our reservoirs, but looking back at, how much water came into our watershed in that period. And through the analysis of our water rights and roughly bringing it all together, we saw that there was about 125,000 acre feet that we actually spilled. So in addition to filling up, we also had 125,000 acre feet estimated that was spilled over top of the reservoirs, over the spillways in that period.
Sorry, Lucy, that's an amazing number.
It is an amazing number. Yeah, it was, it stopped me in my tracks when I put it together and I could see, kind of how much water we received with 75 inches when our average is 52. And it shows the impact of having atmospheric rivers, and when they come one after another and your watershed is already saturated, that the runoff just accumulates very quickly.
Just follow-up quick question. Any idea the last time we spilled a significant amount like that?
I believe it was just before 2019. So the one that's that's shown up here, I can't say it was that much, but I believe in the winter of 2019 we did spill. That was the last time we spilled. We haven't looked at the quantity yet. That's definitely the next analysis we're going to look at, given what we're seeing. But that was the last El Nino.
Gotcha. And the number is it's hard to comprehend. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, thank you, Terry. As I mentioned, so we're starting this water year, we're ending last water year in a very good place. It's actually a historically high reservoir storage level, based on the rainfall and runoff that we received, but also because of some operational strategies that we've taken. So taking a lot of front loading our purchases of supplemental supply from Sonoma County. So by taking that, we've decreased how much, as soon as we stopped spilling, we started taking from Sonoma, and that decreases how much is taken out of our reservoirs. So maintaining that supply in our local reservoirs. So actually starting this October 1st, we're at the highest that we've seen since we raised Kent Dam. And that's what this chart is showing, where on average, we're usually around 55,000 acre feet for this time of year. And what's really incredible, if I just keep going on this chart, is that 2 years ago, we were actually at the lowest we had ever been at for this time of year. So 2 years ago, we looked at this chart very differently. And in 2019, I mentioned, let's see if I can I went the wrong way. If I can get my mouse, I don't know if there it is. So 2019, this was another El Nino. We actually spilled as well here. And 2017 was also a large rainfall year. So those were 2 years where we were kind of in a similar situation.
a future of extremes.
Yes, very much so. You can see looking through this chart, right? It goes very high and then it drops.
Right. Future of extremes. And, obviously with the chart and as we're working on with our strategic water supply assessment, if you had a bigger bucket, you would modulate, the lows.
So then moving kind of to the other side of the equation, which is looking at demand and production. And Carrie's talked a little bit about this as well. So looking at how much demand we're seeing from our customers. In September, we still saw about 18% below 2020 levels. It is a tad bit higher than last year. So it's the blue bar for September is 2023, and the green bar is lowest at the peak of the drought. So we're seeing it's still quite a bit lower than the peak of the 2020, but we're seeing a tiny bit of rebound month over month. So it's a bit of wait and see how this goes moving forward. And then moving into seasonal forecast, NOAA is predicting an El Nino, a strong El Nino. So based on the surface temperatures in the equator, they're saying that we're likely to see warmer weather and also more rain. And so this is the most recent precipitation and temperature outlook that they've projected through NOAA. Through at least February. There's only so much you can take from these charts, right? It's above, below, but for us, it just gives us a marker to point at and think about how do we plan over the next few months.
It has changed from the last time
Yes.
Paul presented this to us.
Yes. And I always look at what is the issued date because
Right.
it's hard to keep track of what they issue most recently. But this one was October 19th, and they have updated it where they're showing this SF Bay area as above. So given the projection for an El Nino this year, we took a look back at what does that mean for the district and for California? And El Ninos are typically referred to as wetter than average years across the state. It does usually have a bigger impact on Southern California, closer to the equator. But it does usually impact Northern California a bit. We looked back at the data that we have associated with El Ninos, and our average rainfall typically is 52 inches across the board. And for El Ninos, we typically see 57 inches. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less, but the average is 57 inches. So right now we expect it probably could be more than average is our forecast.
We have really no idea. I mean, we did this a couple of years ago. We were like, what does it look like? Right. And there's dry years and wet years associated with El Nino and La Nina.
Absolutely.
And so the average gives us 10% more, but we could be drier.
Right.
So
it is all over the map. And
yeah.
That's why we look at this and then we take exactly what you're saying and we wrap it into our projections and we kind of bracket it and want to know where we're starting from and what are the possible ranges that we could end up in. So the black line shown here is the reservoir storage. So the actual that we've had since 2022 down to, I guess, just a little bit past, it shows September, but that's our actuals kind of coming down to the base of that. And then it breaks into three lines. The green line that is dashed and goes up, that's average runoff. So that's if we were to receive, an estimated average runoff, we would jump up to spill quite quickly. And that's really based on where we're starting at in such a good position. And then the two lower lines, those are using an assumption of 50% runoff. So a much drier year, kind of a first year of a drought assumption. And the two lower lines are broken into two different scenarios. One being staying in a low demand. So what we're seeing with like 18 to 20% reduced from 2020 levels, and the orange being a higher demand. So our reservoirs would drop lower. But all in all, it's projecting that we're in a very good position going into this water year. So as I mentioned, our current operating strategy has been to maximize our take from Sonoma water as soon as the reservoir stopped spilling. And as you can see in the table up here, we have been doing that. Since July, you can see that it's basically been 50-50 between our reservoirs and Sonoma, really maximizing what we can take. But given the forecasts, we're looking forward and starting to phase our reduction of our purchases for supplemental water to stay in line and see really, as you said, Director Schmidt, what does this winter look like? Do we stay within our take or pay, or do we go beyond if it is dry?
Really, go ahead. You're on a summary page.
No, go ahead. So in summary, reservoir storage is at its highest historical level for this time of year, based on kind of where we ended last year with runoff, and then also the operating strategy that's been in place with supplemental supply. We expect wet winter, but can adjust our operational strategies as needed. As I mentioned, and then conservation levels still remain about 18 to 20% is what we're seeing. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
I'll go right, left.
Great. Thank you very much for this. And again, the data is somewhat mind-blowing based on the numbers here. It reminded me, I was talking to General Manager Hornstein just before the meeting about last year in December. The presentation was, the outlook this year, we're not sure 50% wet or 50% dry. We're really not sure what the year is going to bring. And then all of a sudden this happened. So I think it just lines back to that. We're not really completely sure. And to your point, Monty, earlier. But I think, to point out the elephant in the room, I mean, this is driving the importance of increased storage here in Marin County. And if we do that, we'll have a sustained benefit through these big peaks and valleys. And I think we'll be better suited or better prepared for any continued variation or any more severe variation in the water cycle if we can keep more here. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Lucy. Super interesting. When you talk about updating the purchase strategy now from Sonoma, is the idea to extend the period under which we would try to achieve the minimum take or pay? Is to hold off on purchases until we get later into the water year to determine how things are looking?
So I think right now, Director Cush, if I may, we're basically going to phase or ramp down our purchasing. We're not going to throw it all on 00 and claim we know it's going to be wet. It does. All indications are that we're preparing for a wet winter, and so we're just, as our seasonal demand reduces, we're just ramping down our take from Sonoma, and you may see that percentage shift from 50% to down closer to the more typical 20%.
Got it. Yeah, I think the only other thing is maybe just to reiterate what Matt noted. We have a really small bucket. It fills up very fast and it empties very fast. So a large part of improving our resilience is going to be addressing that challenge.
I'm just going to stick on that last point, the point before about what we're doing with our purchases. And if there's a way to bring the slide back up that shows the what would happen even in an average year. And while you're getting that up, I'll just make the point, which is even if we get an average year, not even a wet year, we're predicted to spill. And I think it would be really interesting to see an analysis of how much below average of a year would still result in us, spilling a little bit. That gives us that frequency, that percent chance that water that we're purchasing right now will just, I don't want to say be wasted, but it will spill. And so 2 points, which is, I think it begs the question of what's the right risk in this situation. I don't have an answer for that, but I think it would be interesting to see how dry of a year would we have to have in order to not regret having purchased water. I think, and it brings up another point, which is I really think in terms of our partnership with Sonoma, if there's some way we can work on some sort of future arrangement where if we can hold off further, our take or pay and be able to, continue to store in their system, which has much larger storage and still some available storage, over into the spring. Maybe we take there's some sort of, if they spill, we take some losses or something else. But I think it would be really great if we had some other option other than to look at the percentage and take it or not. If there was some other management mechanisms, I think that would be, again, really helpful for us to be as effective in our management option as we can.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. And as you know, last year, we did in fact work on that with Sonoma, and they granted us an extension. If you remember, the North Marin intertie was down, and we made our minimum take or pay payment on time, but we were given an extension of this whole year in order to take that extra water. So there's sort of a paradigm there that we can work on.
Yeah, I'll build on that. I think we have a growing, strong relationship with Sonoma, and I only see more upside for how we can further partner and help them and help us together. For this slide, I think the most important thing for me is not how much water we have and how much is spilling. It's how critically important conservation and water efficiency is to our system. We, as far as I'm concerned, are still in a crisis. We have one of the smallest supplies of any water district. In order to satisfy our customers' needs, we only have 2 years worth of storage. We are in many ways the canary in the coal mine. We were the first municipal water district in the state of California that the governor declared a drought emergency in the last drought, and that's because we really are tight. So the value that we have with our water efficiency programs and efforts cannot be overstated. It says it right there. If we go back to normal demand, we're starting to chow away at this. In 2 years of drought, we're right back into a crisis. So I highly encourage our customers to keep it up. It'll reduce your bills and it'll help your whole community, have resiliency for the future.
This is Larry. Jed, you've said that before, and you said it on Sunday. There's 78,000 acre feet in the reservoirs, and we use about 25,000. So there's 3 years of storage when the reservoirs are full, not 2. So I don't know where you're getting that number from, but it's not right.
Is it all usable? I don't. All 75,000 can we?
No, but there's only like 10,000 that's not usable.
And Paul, what do you think?
Well, so both numbers would be correct depending on what you're talking about. But in terms of our total demand on our reservoirs, which would include environmental releases and evaporation, it's closer to 2 years. But from a drinking water perspective, if that's all the demands were, it's technically a 3 years.
But we bring water in from the Russian River, so it isn't all coming from the reservoirs.
Correct.
That's 25%. I mean, you got to take it into account.
Larry, do you have any other comments?
Only this. I was shocked at the 125,000 acre feet of spill. That's a huge number, much larger than I thought it ever was. It's an interesting number. Do we know exactly where it's spilling from the most?
I would have to look a little bit closer, but it at the end, a lot of it goes over Kent. A large majority, but it
goes over what?
It goes over Kent.
Okay.
I can look more closely, but I can't recall off the top of my head. But Kent with the 5 reservoir, there was quite a bit that came over top there.
Have we determined how they arrived at the height of Kent in the last time they raised it?
No, not yet. We're working on that.
Anything else, Larry?
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
We have a couple of public comments. First, Mr. Phil Sauter, then Larry Minikis.
Thanks for the presentation. These comments are kind of a blend of response to item C and D. So our strategic goals for water supply. And for me, a big question is how can we preserve and extend our supply of pristine potable water for uses that only potable water can fulfill? And I'll stick with a goal of a reliable potable water supply of 4 years. And that leads to a second strategic goal of sourcing and distributing a significant amount of recycled water for non-potable uses. Combined, I think these two goals could let us match supply and demand. Right now, it looks like our potable to non-potable demand is 50-50 and perhaps 40-60. But our supply and distribution capacity is 98% potable and 2% non-potable. I think it should be a strategic goal to bring these ratios into better alignment. And a growing number of water districts are turning to purple pipes. Conservation can get us there, perhaps not completely and not very quickly. I took a look. It's really hard to find a water district that's not dealing with recycled water and purple pipe system. A couple I pulled off the internet today. One was Redwood City, where in 2004, the city council approved an expansion of the recycled water system, adding 2 tertiary treatment facilities, 2.2 million gallon storage tanks, a distribution pump station, and 17 miles of distribution pipelines. Since pumping began in 2007, the recycled water project has helped save hundreds of millions of gallons of drinking water each year. And then East Bay Mud has built an infrastructure with the capability to provide over 9 million gallons per day of recycled water. Their 2040 goal is to recycle 20 million gallons per day of water, or nearly 7.3 billion gallons annually. They say that amount could save enough water to supply the indoor and outdoor water needs of more than 220,000 East Bay Mud residents per day. So I really would advocate for making water supply part of the strategic 5-year plan and to elevate non-potable water to a more significant role in water supply. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd just like to add, coincidental to this, on NPR Marketplace this afternoon was a discussion about something called FERO, which is the district is no stranger to, which is forecast-informed reservoir operations. And what the article was, or the story is really about, and it's in Wired, it was the author, so there's a story in Wired right now, and that's what I want to bring to everyone's attention, is really for water managers to be able to do a better job of reservoir management using advanced weather forecasting. So it just seemed to be appropriate time to bring this up. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have one more speaker, Miss Marilyn Price. Go ahead, Miss Price.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to pick up on what Jed was talking about in terms of, just being aware of how we always need to conserve wet or dry, even in these wet years. I think that's what's missing for our residents who live here. Just enough knowledge of, I think I've mentioned this before, but enough knowledge of the whole water situation that is going to motivate them to do more, to save this most precious resource that we have. I really think, some really heavy emphasis on education. In the schools, I know you send out your newsletters. I read them. I read your emails, but I'm just wondering, the bulk of the population is not. And how we put some funds toward, some really heavy education. It's just so important, and it's not just for the water issue. The water is just one of many issues that we have to attend to for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price. There are no further speakers.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that brings us to our next agenda item, which is an informational item on our strategic plan development.
Good evening, directors. Adrienne Mertens, Communications Public Affairs Manager, here tonight with the Catalyst Group, the district's consultant, who is helping us with development of our next 5-year strategic plan. I have Charles Gardner here next to me, and then Lenadria Porter is behind me in the audience. They've been working with the district now since the summer on this effort, and we were in front of you about a month ago now with focused discussion on the mission, visions, and values statement that the district currently has, and assessing those to determine if there's any adjustments that we want to make there as we proceed forward with development of the strategic plan, as those are really the foundational items in helping us to develop the new plan. And tonight we're going to take a more focused look at strategic plan goals. And Charles is going to walk through a presentation on that and then lead a discussion as well. And so I'll turn it over to him. Thanks.
Okay, so how do I make that live? How does that work? Okay. Good evening, directors. Nice to see you again. This is the second conversation we've had about the strategic plan with you. We are again tonight staying at a very high level. We have future discussions planned that will dig into some details. So I'm looking for some high level direction just as we begin to talk about goals and objectives with the staff to develop those in more detail and bring them back to you. So again, trying to stay at a high level, but focus now on goals. I'm going to talk a little bit about the prior goals, talk a little bit about framing the goals, and this is where we want some guidance from you, and then some initial goals that are not fully fleshed out, but just to give you to help think about the framing, to have some practical examples. You'll remember this diagram. You're probably going to see it a lot from me, just framing what we are thinking, the structure of the strategic plan. So the vision, mission, and values that we talked about last month. Today, we're starting the conversation about goals and objectives. And then ultimately, your annual work plan will include a lot more details. But the intent is that the goals and objectives are high level to guide the overall organization for the next 5 to 10 years. So let me start with the prior goals and what those look like. And we had one on water system resiliency. We had one on financial stewardship. We had one on communications. We had one on environmental stewardship, one on workforce, and then the last one was on risk management. And just a couple of observations about these. The one on risk management, the details of that were 10 strategies, each of which referred back to specific goals and objectives in the other 5 goals. So it really wasn't a standalone, but I think it was acknowledging that risk management, there are lots of elements of risk management that apply in lots of aspects of what you do here. The other observation I would make here is that there's a total of 40 strategies and 158 objectives. I would suggest that that's not what you want at a high level of your strategic plan. Lots of those objectives are more action oriented and are probably more appropriate in your annual plans. So that's one of the things that we're going to work on is keeping the goals and objectives at a high level and putting details into annual work plans. So I want to talk just briefly about framing the strategic goals and what we're trying to do here. So just the idea of the goals is that we want to effectively align and guide the organization, and we want to demonstrate the commitment to the vision, mission, and values that we talked about last month. So ultimately, this is all a nested set, but it really is. And I think we've heard this from each of you, is that the alignment of the organization is really one of the fundamental things we're trying to achieve with the strategic plan. So I'm going to lay out sort of two options about framing. One is with sort of three more integrated goals. This idea came from staff, and I think it fits with a lot of what we heard from each of you, is integrating across the organization is an important element of alignment. And so that got us thinking about, well, could we design our goals to be sort of more integrated goals? The second option is more functional goals that may align with sort of how the organization is structured. And there's no right answer here, but just interested in your thoughts about what you think reflects how you think the organization ought to operate, and how you think it ought to demonstrate its commitment to the customers, to your partners, et cetera, of what you're trying to accomplish. So in thinking about this, a couple of things to keep in mind. One is we are going to be developing more specific language around goals and objectives and action plans. So thinking about how they're framed at the kind of 3 integrated or 5 functional might matter in how we develop the details. And then other considerations, I mentioned risk management as something that applies across the organization in different ways. There are some other topics like communications, and you've talked a lot about the importance of your partnerships or customer service. Those are things that apply across the organization. So how do we want to think about that? Fiscal responsibility, you've just had big rate increases. That's going to be a really high priority. So how do you want to frame that in relation to your goals? You've all talked about the importance of being a leading organization and innovation. So is there a specific way that ought to fit into the goals? And then the development and enhancement of the workforce, something applies across the whole organization. How does that fit in this? So those are all things to think about with this framing question of what do you like, kind of 3 integrated goals or 5 more functional goals. So I'll give you these examples and then we can have some discussion around it. Don't be too attached to the wording. We have not really worked extensively with the staff on kind of, is this the right wording or is this the right framing? But as an example of this is what 3 kind of integrated goals might look like. Reliable water supply. You've all mentioned that's really goal number 1, no matter how we frame it, everything. So providing water supply for customers. Put a few details underneath that through water use efficiency program, expanded storage, your partnership with Sonoma, development of new supplies. So capturing that whole focus as an integrated goal across the organization in different ways. I think the big integrated part of this is goal 2, thinking of a resilient water system and how it delivers and serves customers, but thinking of it as both your watershed and your infrastructure together. And the idea of integrating that is that you then think about the whole system is intended to deliver high quality water supply. The whole system should be fire and earthquake resilient. The whole system should have promote healthy watershed habitats and natural resources, and the whole system should provide recreation benefits. So it's really merging together or integrating the land stewardship function and the infrastructure management functions. And then the third goal being the foundational organizational excellence and developing your people, your leadership, your administrative function so that you live by your values. That was something I heard from several of you, and I think that's a really a really important concept to capture here in the organizational aspect. But you're delivering to your customers. You're an attractive place to work. You have attraction and retention of great people. So a goal focused on organizational excellence. So there's a way to think about 3 more integrated goals. One of the things you may lose is it may be hard to see particular elements that you think are important in the goals. When you have a more integrated description, it may not be as clear to people that you're really thinking about the watershed, or you're really thinking about fire resilience or something, that. So that's one thing you may lose in the integrated approach. So the example of 5 functional goals, reliable water supply, and I took some of the words out here just so I didn't repeat them, but reliable water supply still being goal number 1. A resilient water system, in this case, thinking about particularly the infrastructure. So you have a functional focus on the resilience of your infrastructure. Goal 3, calling out the watershed stewardship function that you have, protecting and managing the lands for long-term benefits. Goal 4, calling out the fiscal responsibility and highlighting that as an important goal for the organization. So it's right up front as a top level goal. And then goal 5, still the organizational excellence, the foundation of accomplishing all of these things is having an organization that lives by its values, that has great people. Here you might get a little bit more detail on calling some things out that makes some things clearer, that might be attractive, but you may not get a sense of the organization working across functions to accomplish something. So I think I'll stop there. I put the mission, vision, values into the presentation, not to go over them, but in case you want to look at them again. They're still a work in progress, so I haven't finished editing those, but I put those in if we want to look at them, to think about them and how they might nest with goals. But my main question is, do you like the more integrated kind of 3 big goals that might help support cross-functional work in the organization? Or do you like the kind of 5-goal approach where it's more maybe more aligned with different functions, and they may highlight some things that are important to say to your customers or to your staff? So I'll pause there and see what thoughts you have.
Any board comments?
I'm supportive of your 5 goals. I think that makes sense. I think it is clear in providing guidance. I appreciate your thought process in going through it. I think that the organizational excellence kind of is an overriding one. We can achieve the other 4 if we have that. And I'm glad you have it highlighted. But open communication, open discourse, being able to dissent and have open conversations about how we can do better is critical to any organization's success. And so I want to just free up the brilliant intelligence that Crystal talked about earlier of our staff to be able to help us all do better, and that we can lock arms. The only things that I think are slightly missing, and I'm only saying, and I know we're not wordsmithing here, but you do have a lot of words that are following each of the goals. I do think that risk it is taken out now, but it's not put back in even in your subtexts. So the fire risk is massive. The habitat protection is massive. And then lastly, it's not just about fiscal responsibility to make sure we have enough funds to maximize value and effectiveness. We're missing affordability here. And critical is not only providing clean, healthy drinking water, but that we're affordable and as efficient as we possibly can be. And I think that has to be right at the top of how we think about fiscal responsibility.
No, that's great. That's really helpful.
I'm also in support of the 5-goal piece. I think that the 3-goal piece is just 3 goals with a ton of subpoints that you could probably count the same amount of words in the 5-goal thing as well. But going back to that, I think the these 5 goals make sense. I could even see 1 and 2 being combined to some extent, and then replacing or adding in the risk piece like Jed talked about, because it is a legitimate concern for us, and it should be where we put a lot of priority time and energy for that. It would be good to dive a little bit deeper into the follow-up words that you have there. We talk about the watershed stewardship, and that could be a bigger category on its own, but to limit it so it doesn't get out of control. But we do have a recreational component that we haven't mentioned yet, and we're already down to goals, and it's getting pretty far down the strategic plan without addressing that here. And then also look to really, I think the word restore belongs in there somewhere with the watershed piece, because we protect and manage, but we should be restoring our lands to the way that they were for a long time before, Marin Water took over. So to the same point of the fiscal responsibility, adding in affordability, adding in a few other keywords in there, and I think the skeleton's starting to look pretty good to hang the rest of the stuff off of.
No, that's really helpful. Yeah.
I agree with that. I think we have to add the word equity as well, because that is a critical aspect of this. The affordability, Jed is right on, and Matt's right on. Affordability is a critical aspect of this whole picture of water supply and what can be done. I mean, desal, it looks easy on the surface, but the cost impact is just horrendous, and let alone the environmental impacts. It's just the cost alone. It's just not practical. And maybe if you're in Saudi Arabia with no choice, it becomes more practical in free energy. But it's in a regular environment, it's very difficult, as San Diego's finding. So we need to be very careful to stay focused on what we can really do, not just a pipe dream of what we might be able to do.
Thanks, Larry.
Yeah, Charles, between the 3 integrated goals or the 5 functional goals, really whatever works better for establishing indicators that allow us to monitor progress towards achieving those goals. I gave you and Lenadria an earful when we met about the results of the last strategic plan. It didn't go well, right? The strategic plan was developed. 2 years later, we had lost $40 million. We had the least amount of water available since 1977, and 3 of the board members were replaced. And I think part of that is not setting some sort of system to monitor progress towards achieving goals. So whatever system is more amenable to setting those kinds of indicators that we really can actually monitor progress towards. I think maybe on the one item related to organizational excellence, if there's a piece in there where we also have a goal of convincing our constituents that we are excellent, that we are the best, that we are a treasured agency within Marin. I don't think we should ever lose sight of ensuring that our public, appreciates the district as much as we do.
Right.
I too, I think probably the 5 functional goals seems, 3 is probably too few, and you have to pack a lot into them to cover what we need to, I think. And so I support this list. I want to just not wordsmith, but shine some spotlights on some things that folks have already said. I do think we have to, I want to say that we get out of managing risk, but I want us to recognize we constantly live with risk, and that we are prepared for the risks that are coming, that are around us constantly. That we live in that environment. And so I don't know, when we talk about a resilient water system, it's resilient because we are planning for the uncertainties. They're almost certain that there are uncertainties, and we're in some way prepared for them. So in some ways, I think the invest and maintain a resilient water supply system is almost like a reliable water supply system. It's a given that we make sure that our pipes deliver water. Like, that's foundational, of course. And I agree that it should be number 1. But I think the resiliency of our system is more than just our system. It's about being prepared for fire. It's about recognizing that we have climate and variability, that we have the water supply and infrastructure to be prepared into the future. So something to that effect. I think as part of organizational excellence, I think there's been that we're kind of packing a lot into there. So there might be a 6th. I'm not saying, but you can decide. But I really do think that it's really important, I think, for the district to be as good as we want it to be. I think we also need to have an internal goal that actually speaks to how we want to be as an organization unto ourselves, which is really, I think, about respecting all of our colleagues, all of the staff that do all the work that it takes. It takes so many things to make this district run. And I think that the way we treat ourselves and we think of ourselves is also how we think of our customers and how we think of our community, because we are customers, like Crystal is a customer, and we are also part of the community. And so I feel that there might be some part I'd like to see in there as well. Any other board comments? Take it away, Charles. What's next?
Oh, the only thing really I have next was just next steps. So we are now going to go back, work with Ben, Adrian, the senior leadership team. There's been a lot of staff input on specifics that ought to be included in this. We're going to have to fold all those into these goals and objectives. So there's a lot of massaging we're going to do to get these goals right, get the objectives at a reasonable level, that they are measurable. And I think the plan is to come back to you regularly with a goal at a time and really dig deeper into each one. Do we have the top level right? Do we have the objectives right? Do we have some metrics identified, et cetera? So that's our job, to keep massaging, but now really working with all the staff to flesh them out and bring them back for a deeper dive on each one. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we go to item number 9.
We have
sorry,
yeah.
pull the current. Sorry.
No worries. We have 2 public comments or speakers, Ed Jamison, then Larry Minikis. Go ahead, Mr. Jamison.
Yes, the watershed stewardship goal number 3 should have the words wildfire prevention added. And I like tonight's more concise presentation. And well-managed companies have focus as one of their overarching objectives. Too many so-called goals lead to a diffuse statement that is ultimately meaningless. Too much verbiage results in no effective focus. The word focus should drive further refinement of goals and objectives. Further effort should be driven to achieve conciseness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to address process rather than content here, and just say it's very encouraging to see this process unfold in the way it is. And one of the very valuable things this is going to provide is as this board turns over in the future. And the things that we're discussing here, and this board is doing a very good job. And I think any educated observer would say that this board is headed in the right direction. But the concern is, what are future boards going to do as well? And this will provide that direction. And I think the other thing this does is, there was a discussion a few weeks ago about being innovative here. And this sets your foundation for innovation, I think. So thank you very much.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay. All right. With that, Terry, future board and committee meetings and updated agenda items.
Yes, good evening. So directors, I'm sorry, actually this week, this Thursday, not this Friday, this Thursday, October 26th is the Finance and Administration Committee meeting. So that's a typo. And it starts at 9:30 a.m. Then the next board meeting is Tuesday, November 7th, and then we'll have the Operations Committee meeting on Friday, November 17th. Some external meetings coming up. Saturday, October 28th is the annual Volunteer Appreciation Event, which is sponsored by our district, One-Tam and Marin County Parks, and that starts at 11 a.m. Then there are a couple of external meetings on the same day: the North Bay Watershed Association, Friday, November 3rd, and the Lagunitas Creek Technical Advisory Committee on November 3rd. North Bay starts at 9:30 and the Lagunita starts at 9. Then the following Monday is the Sonoma WAC TAC meeting, and that's at 9 a.m. And that's all I have. And I do have a public speaker for this too.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Phil Sauter.
Thank you. I meant to make this comment at last Friday's operation meeting on Zoom, but the meeting got adjourned before that last item was covered. I'm not sure why the recycled water update was tabled, but I'm glad it was. Over the past years, we've all heard facts and figures suggesting that the role of recycled water has been changing and is likely to change even more dramatically. But I'm not sure that our assumptions regarding recycled water have been keeping pace. So I'm hopeful that future update will examine our assumptions in some detail. For example, we tend to assume that Marin Water has a single potable water product, which is used for 98% of all customer usage. But in fact, our per capita usage numbers suggest that less than half our water is used indoors and more than half is used outdoors for irrigation and doesn't need to be the same quality as indoor water. Second, we seem to assume that customers have the same perception of recycled water, whether it's used for drinking or used for lawn irrigation. In fact, I think if we were to ask customers, we'd find that they have very different reactions to drinking recycled water than they do for spraying their lawn with it. They may not want to drink recycled water if the alternative were to use it instead for outdoor irrigation. Third, we seem to assume that all customers use water in the same way. We have a 2019 study that shows relatively few customers use relatively large quantity of water outdoors, where non-potable water is as good as potable water. It seems like it's well past time to update that old study and see just how many of our heavy water users account for the bulk of our outdoor water usage and where they're located. Rather than assuming we'd need a purple pipe distribution system for 60,000 customers throughout the district, or even for 10,000 customers throughout central and southern Marin, it may be that a localized purple pipe system connecting 1,000 customers to a source of recycled water may be sufficient to preserve our supply of high-quality potable water for indoor use. I think this is what Director Schmidt refers to as decision-making data. Fourth, we tend to assume that most users would be okay with adding recycled water to our current excellent product so that a relatively few customers can use large amounts of potable water outdoors. I'm not sure that's true. And fifth, we seem to assume that irrigation users would not pay for recycled water, and I'm not sure that's true either. Redwood City gives away the first 300 gallons, but that's it. By the time recycled water returns to the agenda in a future meeting, I hope it will look at our existing assumptions and see if it's time to update them. Such an update may even have implications for how we look at conservation and other sources of water supply. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, item number 10, we're announcement of our closed session items. And are there any public comments on closed session items?
There are none.
Okay, with that, we are going to adjourn to our closed session. We reconvened from closed session at 8:20 p.m. with no reportable actions. And with that, we are adjourned.